Malia Ann Obama grew up in the spotlight of the world, daughter of former U.S. President Barack Obama and the admired Michelle Obama. She has always been aware that power and privilege come with immense responsibility. From a young age, her parents taught her that the true impact is not only in what you show to the world, but also in what you do silently for it. Now an adult and in charge of a large organization that she inherited and expanded with mastery, Malia took with her the teachings of compassion, empathy, and leadership. He knew that his last name carried weight, but he also knew that true respect was earned by the way he treated people, regardless of their positions or social positions. She used to walk through the company's corridors unannounced. She liked to observe the genuine workings without filters or appearances set up to impress her. He always made a point of greeting employees by name, knowing their stories, understanding their struggles, and when possible, doing something for them. He believed that an organization was only truly successful when everyone felt valued. He knew that a healthy and prosperous environment was built not only by efficiency and innovation, but by dignity and respect. But despite her genuine interest in each person who worked at the company, Malia wasn't perfect, and on that particular morning, as he walked through the lobby with his usual attention to detail, something caught his attention in a different way. It was such a small detail that it could have gone unnoticed by anyone, but not for Malia. Her eyesight, trained to see beyond appearances, detected a subtle shadow in the eyes of a cleaning worker named Rosa, a woman who was always discreet, punctual, who performed her work with exemplary dedication. What was there in that look? Was it exhaustion, worry, despair? Malia could not immediately identify her, but there was something, and that instinct that her parents had cultivated in her since childhood, to never ignore a pain, even if silent, began to pulsate. That same afternoon, as she walked through the corridors to an important meeting, Malia spotted Rosa again. This time he observed more carefully. Rosa seemed in a hurry, although her work remained impeccable. There was something urgent in her movements, as if she carried an invisible weight that only she understood. It was then that Malia decided she needed to understand what was going on, not out of banal curiosity, but because he knew that the true value of a leader is not only in the ability to manage, but in the sensitivity to notice when something is wrong. Whatever it was, she would find out. And that would change not only Rosa's life, but also her own view of what it really meant to lead. The next day, Malia Ann Obama could no longer ignore what she had seen. Her mind kept going over every detail: Rosa's tired look, her hurried movements, the way she avoided any eye contact as if she was afraid of being noticed. For Malia, it was a clear sign that something wasn't right. It was an ordinary day at the Aussie company. The employees followed their usual routines, talking, laughing, and fulfilling their tasks. The building was a reflection of modernity and progress, full of energy and productivity. But in the midst of all this movement, Malia kept her attention focused on Rosa. It was at lunchtime that the situation became even more intriguing. Malia had sat at one of the tables in the canteen to have lunch and observe in disguise the employees' behavior. Rosa entered the canteen as she did every day, without haste, but also without the relaxation of the other employees. She took her meal and, unlike the others who sat down to eat, Rosa did something unusual. She carefully wrapped the food with a napkin, put the package in her bag, and left quickly, without exchanging a single word with anyone. The next day, Malia repeated the remark, and the scene was repeated. Rosa never ate in the canteen. Never. I just took the food, wrapped it, and put it in my bag with an almost desperate hurry. And then, as if it were a task of the utmost urgency, I left the canteen without looking around. That behavior repeated day after day was impossible to ignore, and more than that, it was painful to watch. Malia knew something terribly wrong was going. Rosa had free access to the company's food, and even so, she refused to eat. What could lead someone to do this? That afternoon, Malia discreetly called one of the cleaning crew supervisors for an informal conversation. He asked about Rosa, disguising his curiosity with professional interest. He discovered that Rosa was an impeccable employee, always polite, punctual, and dedicated. He had never complained about anything. He had never asked for anything. But that wasn't enough for Malia. She wanted to understand the reason behind that behavior. She wanted to know what was going on in Rosa's life that forced her to save her meal every day without even tasting a piece. Basically, Malia was already starting to put the puzzle together. But part of her still wanted to believe that there was a logical explanation, something that could ward off that growing restlessness in her chest. But the following days only confirmed what she already knew. Rosa kept taking the meal, wrapping it carefully and leaving in silence, as if the simple act of eating was a luxury she could not afford. Malia couldn't get it out of her head. Her intuition screamed that Rosa was going through something very difficult, and the fact that this woman carried that pain in silence without ever asking for help made Malia's heart tighten in an indescribable way. Now she knew she couldn't just ignore it. I needed to find out what was happening, and I needed to do it soon. Malia Ann Obama's decision had been made. It was no longer a matter of curiosity, but of genuine empathy and responsibility. It was impossible to ignore Rosa's repeated behavior, as if each meal she had saved was too precious a treasure to be wasted on herself. That afternoon, Malia organized her schedule to finish the day a little earlier. This time, his intention was not only to observe Rosa in the canteen, but to find out what happened next. She knew she needed to be discreet, that any reckless approach could scare Rosa, or worse, make her stop taking the food wherever she went. When the clock struck the end of the day, Malia strategically positioned herself in an area where she could observe the employees leaving without being seen. His heart was beating fast, not because of the anxiety of any discovery, but because of the fear of confirming what he was already beginning to fear. Rosa left through the main door holding the bag against her chest, as if protecting something priceless. He walked with quick steps, his head down, avoiding any eye contact. His entire body emanated the urgency of one who carries an invisible but desperately heavy burden. Malia followed her, keeping enough distance not to be noticed. With each step, his concern grew. They crossed streets, passed through busy neighborhoods until, little by little, the scenario began to change. Well-kept sidewalks have given way to uneven pavements. The vibrant lights of commercial establishments have been replaced by flashing lamps and deteriorated facades. Finally, Rosa stopped in front of an old, worn building with gray walls and windows that seemed unmaintained in years. He took a key from his pocket with trembling hands and opened the door carefully, as if the simple act of turning the lock required more strength than he had. Malia waited a few seconds before approaching the main window, trying to hide among the shadows of the dimly lit street. The vision he found inside broke his heart. In a small room with almost no furniture, two children sat on the floor, their eyes attentive and hopeful, waiting for their mother to arrive. As soon as Rosa entered, the faces of the little ones lit up as if they had received the greatest gift in the world. With a tired but genuine smile, Rosa knelt down next to them and took out of her bag the carefully wrapped package she had brought from the company. With an almost sacred delicacy, she divided the food among her children, never even touching a piece for herself. Malia watched the scene in silence, her eyes teary and her chest tightened. That was it. That was why Rosa refused to eat at work. She was prioritizing her children's hunger over her own survival. Each day, each meal taken was an act of desperate and resigned love. At that moment, Malia felt a lump form in her throat. It was impossible to pretend that I had not seen it. It was impossible to ignore the crying need of a mother who sacrificed her own well-being to ensure that her children had something to eat. The return home was long and silent. The streets he passed no longer looked as beautiful and organized as before. Everything seemed to be carried by a weight that didn't exist before. Malia knew she needed to act. He knew that his life could not continue in the same way after witnessing that scene. Rosa's pain was now part of her as well, and that transformed her. That night, Malia Ann Obama could barely sleep. The images of Rosa's small house, the hungry children, the tired but loving look of her mother sharing food without eating anything for herself, hammered in her mind like a constant nightmare. It was as if the scene was engraved in his soul, an invisible wound that would not heal until something was done. At dawn, already determined, Malia arrived at the company earlier than usual. The building was silent, and the air still carried the freshness of dawn, but inside her, everything boiled. His mind had already mapped out the plan. It was not just about helping Rosa, but about understanding the true scope of that problem. It was necessary to act carefully, so that the help did not appear to be humiliating charity, but rather a genuine and humane intervention. He waited patiently until Rosa arrived at work. The employee walked with the same discreet posture as always, her eyes downcast, her body bent by the weight of responsibilities that no one should have to carry alone. Malia watched her for a few minutes, making sure she was alone before calling her to her office. Rosa's face instantly turned into an expression of apprehension. She had never been called to talk to the owner of the company, and from the nervousness in her eyes, it was obvious that she feared the worst. "Rosa, I wanted to talk to you." Malia's voice was soft but firm. "Sit down, please." Rosa sat on the edge of her chair, her body tense as if she were about to be scolded. His hands clasped in his lap betrayed his nervousness. "I need to tell you something," Malia began, carefully choosing her words. "Yesterday I followed you after hours." Rosa's face instantly paled. His eyes widened and his hands began to tremble. "I'm sorry for doing that," Malia continued, noticing the impact of her words. "But I needed to understand what was happening. I saw you come home. I saw your children. I've seen what you do every day." A silent tear ran down Rosa's face. It was as if the facade of strength and resignation she had built over the years had been violently torn away. The silence was stifling. "I'm not here to judge you, Rosa." Malia's voice was now full of emotion. "I'm here because I want to help you. You work so hard, you dedicate yourself so much, and yet you face a struggle that no one should have to face alone." Rosa lowered her head, her shoulders hunched under the weight of a shame she shouldn't carry. I'm sorry," Rosa said, her voice almost a whisper. "I never wanted anyone to know. I just wanted my kids to have enough to eat." Malia's heart ached with every word. That suffering could no longer go unnoticed. "You don't have to apologize for anything," Malia said, leaning forward, her eyes fixed on Rosa's. "On the contrary, I must apologize for not having realized this before, for having allowed you to carry this pain alone." Rosa tried to speak, but her voice failed her. Tears now ran freely down his face. I had never imagined that someone of Malia's position could really care. For her, the powerful always looked only at the numbers, at the profits. But Malia didn't stop there. "I don't want you to go through this ever again. I'll help you, Rosa. I will help you to have a dignified place for you and your children. And more than that, I will ensure that everyone here in the company is treated with the respect and dignity they deserve." Rosa looked at Malia as if she were facing a miracle. His expression was a mixture of disbelief and hope. "I don't know how to thank you," murmured Rosa, her voice breaking. "You don't need to thank me, you just need to accept the help you've always deserved," Malia replied, holding Rosa's trembling hands gently. In that instant, something changed forever. Not only for Rosa, but also for Malia, who now understood that the real power was not in her surname, but in the way she decided to use it. Malia Ann Obama's words were not just empty promises. She was fully aware that helping Rosa at that moment required more than simple goodwill. It required concrete action, practical change, and above all, a well-structured plan. Soon after that, emotional and revealing conversation, Malia acted quickly. As soon as Rosa left her room, still trembling and incredulous at having been listened to so carefully, Malia picked up the phone and began a series of calls that would change the fate of this devoted mother. The first call was to the company's finance department. Malia carefully reviewed the salaries of all outsourced employees, especially those in the cleaning team, who clearly received salaries far below what she considered fair to ensure a dignified life. The plan was clear. No one else would be in need while under his command. Malia then contacted a close friend who ran an organization focused on helping vulnerable families. It was time to make use of the contacts and power that his name carried. But that was not enough. She wanted to ensure that her intervention was more than just a passing gesture of charity. The project that Malia envisioned was grandiose, but at the same time focused on what mattered most: people. She wanted all employees who were struggling to be seen, heard, and helped. No more disguised smiles hiding silent tears. No more invisible workers sacrificing their own needs for the well-being of their children. But before launching any initiative, there was something essential that Malia needed to do. The next morning, he called Rosa back to his office. "Rosa, I said I would help you, and I'm keeping my promise," Malia said firmly and tenderly. "I want you to have a dignified place to live with your children, a home where you can feel safe and happy." Malia then opened a small drawer from her desk and pulled out an envelope. His fingers held the paper for a few seconds before handing it to Rosa. "Inside are the keys to a new apartment, a better place for you and your children to live. It's all paid for, and you don't have to worry about it." Rosa looked at the envelope as if it were a sacred object. Her hands trembled so much that she almost dropped the envelope, his eyes wide, unable to believe what he heard. I can't accept that," Rosa said, her voice choked and full of emotion. "It's too generous, and never have I ever." "You can accept it, and you will," Malia replied with a sincere smile. "Because you deserve it." He always deserved it. Just no one ever looked at you as they should. Rosa broke down in tears, unable to contain the avalanche of emotions that took over her body. Years of struggle, pain, and deprivation were being brought down at that moment by a gesture she never expected to receive. Malia stood up and walked over to Rosa, reaching out for her to stand up as well. "Let's do something, Rosa. From now on, I want you to tell me what you need, not only for you, but for your children. And I'm going to make sure you get what you deserve." But Malia didn't stop there. After securing a new home for Rosa and her family, she called an urgent meeting with her executive team. For hours, they discussed ways to transform the company's culture to ensure that all employees had not only fair wages, but also benefits that would protect them in times of difficulty. Malia has introduced a program to support workers in vulnerable situations. Complete medical care, access to free child care for mothers who needed it, food programs, and decent housing for those who needed it. The changes wouldn't happen overnight, but Malia was determined to make it work. Because now, for her, leadership didn't just mean commanding, it meant caring. Malia understood that the true wealth of a company was in its people, and if people's well-being were not a priority, then everything else would lose its meaning. The impact of Malia and Obama's actions reverberated throughout the company in an overwhelming way. What had started as a simple act of empathy had turned into a real social revolution. The changes she implemented not only improved the quality of life for Rosa and her children, but also gave a voice to dozens of workers who, for so long, had been invisible to the world around them. In the following days, the support program created by Malia began to take shape. The Human Resources Department began to conduct individual and confidential interviews with all employees to identify those who faced situations of vulnerability. Emergency relief funds, free mental health programs, and a financial assistance system were created that provided dignity and real support to those who needed it most. The transformation in Rosa's life was immediate. Now living in a safe and comfortable apartment, her children could play without fear and sleep without hunger. For the first time in years, Rosa was able to rest without the crushing weight of constant worry. But it was not only Rosa who was benefiting. Every employee who needed help finally received it. And for Malia, this was just the beginning. During a meeting with the company's leaders, Malia spoke in a voice full of emotion and determination. We can no longer turn a blind eye to those who make this company work. We cannot ignore the daily struggles that so many people face to provide for their families. If we want to be a truly successful organization, we need to ensure that every person here has a dignified life. It is not enough to offer work. It is necessary to offer humanity. His eyes swept the room. Some executives were still confused by the sweeping changes. Others, touched by Rosa's story, had become her greatest allies. Malia knew she would face resistance, but she also knew she was on the right track. The social support project became part of the organizational culture. Every year, Malia made a point of meeting personally with the employees, listening to stories that would previously have gone unnoticed. It was his personal commitment to make sure that no one else went unnoticed. But it didn't stop there. Malia also began to expand the program to other businesses and local communities, using her influence and the contacts inherited from her family to bring about a much larger transformation. The name Human Look Initiative has become synonymous with compassion, dignity, and respect. Newspapers and television programs began to publicize Malia's work, and the public reaction was overwhelming. Her story inspired other large corporations to reevaluate their worker support, systems sparking a wave of empathy that spread across industries. But for Malia, external recognition was irrelevant. What really mattered was the genuine smile of Rosa and so many other people who had finally found some peace. One morning, while taking her routine walk through the company, Malia was surprised by Rosa, who, now more confident and radiant, was waiting for her at the door of her office. "Good morning, Mrs. Obama," Rosa said with a smile that overflowed with gratitude. "Please, Rosa." "I've already asked you to call me just Malia," she replied with a gentle smile. "Malia. I just wanted to thank you again, not only for what you did for me and my children, but for what you did for so many people here. You changed our lives." Malia held Rosa's hand and replied sincerely, "Rosa, you taught me much more than I could teach you." It was his sacrifice, his courage, that made me realize how much still needed to be done. I just did what anyone should do. See the other as a human being. Rosa nodded, her eyes shining with excitement. But now there was something else in his eyes. Hope. Malia realized that her mission was just beginning, and as long as there was still someone invisible in the world, she would continue to fight for everyone to be seen and valued.